I've always been of the mindset that horror games and scary movies and stuff like that are bad for the soul. They twist your mind and make you feel bad and ruin lots of underwear and stuff. The evil within is bad for you too, but in different ways. Lately my sleeping pills haven't been working very well, so my doctor prescribed me to play this game. I beat it and then promptly slipped into a 4-month coma, and when I woke up yesterday, I felt like I should make a review about my experience with it. The game, not my coma. This game's combined Metacritic score comes out to around a 65 out of 100 when you average it out, so it looks like a lot of other people feel the same way as me about it. We're going to figure out if those scores are fair by ranking each part of the game from the worst to the best, and then giving our own score of it at the end. Alright, let's do this. The characters come in last place. Let me start off by saying that I've never been good with horror games. Like, they still give me nightmares as a 30-year-old, and I get really paranoid and develop concerning rumblings in the bowels. So thankfully the game's characters do their best to make this game almost comically unscary. The thing is that horror is wholly dependent on the human element. Like, if we can't relate to how the character is feeling or reacting, the game will totally lose all of its fear factor. The main character is named Sebastian, but he should probably have been named Sabotage, because he single-handedly ruins his own game's attempts at horror with the way he consistently chooses to respond to a situation. Was that a bad joke? Watch this. Sebastian gets ambushed by this horrifying spider lady, and the first words out of his mouth are, "What is it with you?" So wait, was that a genuine question, Sebastian? What do you mean, what does she want with you? It's obvious that she wants to murder you by using each of her 8 legs to plow into a different hole in your body and doing a jumping jack. I mean, even if she was actually just a nice spider lady who wanted to play a quick game of tag or something, my first reaction would not be to make an awful B-list cop action movie quip. I'd probably be too paralyzed with fear to say anything at all, and then I would projectile diarrhea my pants all the way off of my legs because of how scared I was. And this isn't really an isolated incident either. So many of these characters in this game act like this is just another day at the office, and any illusion of fear that would have been there is completely ruined. I know that a lot of what this game does is deliberately campy. I mean, it's directed by the guy who created the Resident Evil games, which aren't exactly known for playing it straight all the time. In fact, they can be downright silly on purpose. But this doesn't feel the same as that. It honestly just feels like lazy writing, bad voice acting, and head-scratching tonal deficiency. That being said, the bad guys are handled a lot better than the good guys in this game. They come off as sinister and threatening, like I'd expect someone to in their role in this game, unlike most of the main cast of protagonists. The characters get last place. 4th place goes to the story. The game's problems, and as a consequence my problems, continue with the Evil Within story. Sometimes in a horror game, just making it out of this awful situation is enough to keep the plot interesting for players. But like I said before, the way Sebastian acts suggests that he's actually pretty content to just hang out in this living nightmare full of naked meat hook zombies and stupid coworkers. The result is that the opening half of this game is a boring slog through a game whose story every once in a while will pop its head out like a tiny leprechaun who holds the world record for never being caught, but only because no one really cares enough to try to catch him. His treasure is probably only like 3 coins, and you still have to make a 10-hour drive to find them. Okay, that terrible analogy is trying to say that the story just takes way too long to get going, and by the time that it does, it might not really have even been worth it. If you do happen to have biblical levels of patience, it does end up picking up in some interesting ways. I'd almost even say that the game turns from a poorly executed horror experience into a confusing but at least kind of compelling science fiction narrative that just happens to have a decent horror aesthetic. More and more details emerge about these crazy experiments that distort reality that are run by the last kind of person you'd probably want to be in control of such power. Some good moments of storytelling touch on things like a twisted form of familial love, revenge, and the way the life of a troubled mind can bend itself into a self-serving weapon of mass horror and destruction. It's self-recursive too, inviting Sebastian to explore his own past, which in turn gets us players thinking about the same things. But is it good enough to justify the opening 50% of the game? I personally say no, but just because I'm not the biggest fan of these kinds of games in the first place. Maybe you would though, if you're a fan of horror, even if it's not done perfectly. This game really could have benefited from having a more compelling opening act, but it ended up just boring my pants off. I guess my advice would be to take your pants off before playing this game so that that doesn't happen to you too. The story gets 4th place. Third place goes to the music. While there are a couple of standout musical moments, I think what impressed me more is the ambient sound production as a whole. Pretty much everything in the game makes believable and satisfying sounds, from the blasts and explosions to the gruesome ways everything around you noisily dies. There's a bunch of unsettling detail hidden low in the mix that brings a nice sense of cohesion to the overall presentation of the game, like weird little splices of audio played backwards and stretched out and chopped up in ways that feel kind of weird and off-kilter. And another thing that I noticed was that there are some odd futuristic and technological bits of sound effects tucked deep into the music, which maybe kind of plays along with my idea that the game was actually designed to be a science fiction and horror type of concoction thing. My favorite moment, I think overall, was the opening track that sounds like it could have been put at the beginning of a James Bond film or something. It really starts things off right, at least from an audio perspective, which is actually kind of fitting because The Evil Within definitely feels kind of like those old campy Bond films where it's kind of schlocky, but they know it and embrace it for the most part. But after the opening sequence, I can't really remember any specific tracks or time when the music took over a scene or anything, but I can at least remember the way that they made me feel. I think a few more tracks that took center stage would have been nice, or a more identifiable theme or motif running through the game, but I'd say that the music and audio design definitely pulls its weight to help set a good tone for the game. It knows when to use silence too, and nothing is scarier in a horror game than complete silence, at least to me. So yeah, the music's decent even if it's a little meager. It gets third place. Second place goes to the gameplay. I pretty much enjoyed the act of playing this game. It stays out of its own way by giving you a basic, tried and true control scheme and then asking you to get creative with your strategy and stuff to work through the challenges that it puts in front of you. It's skimpy with its resources, but not too much to make it feel like a hindrance to the game's action and pace, like in that one Commandos game that gives you like 9 bullets and asks you to take down the Third Reich. Good thing Hitler didn't need one of those bullets. What an idiot. Anyways, we're losing focus here on games that I also didn't enjoy playing, so let's get back to it and just finish this review off real quick. There's some cool forging and building mechanics that let you make some pretty fun gear to mess around with and take down enemies in different ways. It's a pretty slow moving game too, but I like the time that it gives you to panic, but also to recover and think on your feet of how you're going to deal with whatever's coming your way. I like how the game incorporates puzzles and stuff too. It almost felt like some of those old point and click adventure games at times, with how you had to mess around with the different objects and different rooms to progress. The leveling system too is pretty cool. The ritual of getting violently electric chaired so that you can carry 2 more bullets or whatever. Makes sense. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, you know? But yeah, it was a fun new way to make it happen. I like how the game didn't fully rely on its attempts at being scary to keep things interesting. It's a really good thing because of all the bad things I said about the game before. All in all, the gameplay is a part of the game that I can say was at least good. Nothing totally innovative, but solid enough. The gameplay gets second place. The visuals get first place. This is the one part of the game that I think is actually downright praiseworthy. There are just so many standout moments that have stuck with me since finishing the game. The fact that this isn't effective as a horror game has nothing to do with how it looks, because the presentation is pretty unsettling when it wants to be. And the thing is, it doesn't always want to be. There are a few outright beautiful moments in this game, and the fact that it could be both terrifying and beautiful within seconds of each other I think is pretty cool. The characters, for how much I dislike them, are pretty well designed and look pretty good. A lot of the environments are, I guess, pretty typical of what you'd expect in a game like this, but they're well put together with all kinds of gross and interesting details laying around. So while the game is pretty much linear, it never gets dull even if the color palette they used is a little monochromatic at times. And the imagery that they use for story set pieces is really cool too. I'm just a big fan of the quasi-science fiction thing that they kind of had going on and wish they would have focused a lot more on that. But whatever, it's too late. But yeah, I mean, I like the way this game looks. So that's it. The Evil Within turned out to be its own worst enemy. It feels like for every one thing that they got right, they did 2 things wrong, and it just didn't add up to that good of a game in the end. A 65 out of 100 is pretty generous for this game, I'd say. I mean, I think I'd give it a 60 out of 100, and I still feel like I might be trying to be too nice to the game, but yeah, the game's overrated. And that's the video. Thanks for watching. See ya.